Hi, I hope all is fine. I spent 12 hours reading this book so you don't have to. Here are the 10 game-changing lessons that actually matter. Most people buy books but never finish them. I break down the key insights in under 15 to 20 minutes so you can actually apply what matters. Which lesson hits you hardest? Drop a number 1 to 10 in the comments. Save this for later and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Let's start the video. There's a moment that happens to almost everyone, usually around 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. You look at your screen, then at the clock, and realize with a sinking feeling that you've been working for 6 hours but have accomplished almost nothing that actually matters. Your inbox is a little cleaner, you've attended 2 meetings, you've scrolled through Slack messages and responded to notifications, but that report you needed to write, that strategy you needed to develop, that creative problem you needed to solve, it's still sitting there, untouched, mocking you. And here's the terrifying part. Tomorrow will be exactly the same, and the day after that, and the year after that. While you're drowning in shallow busy work, someone who's learned what you're about to learn is producing work so valuable, so rare, so economically rewarding that they're becoming essentially irreplaceable in an economy that's automating everything it possibly can. Cal Newport's research into deep work reveals a brutal truth about the modern economy. We're living through the most dramatic cognitive shift since the Industrial Revolution, but most people are fighting it with the wrong weapons. They're trying to multitask their way to success in an era that rewards singular, sustained focus. They're competing on availability and responsiveness when the real winners are competing on the ability to produce rare and valuable things. The data is stark and unforgiving. Studies show that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully recover from a single interruption. Think about that for a moment. Every time you glance at your phone, check your email, or respond to a Slack message, you're not losing 30 seconds, you're potentially destroying nearly half an hour of cognitive capacity. Most knowledge workers check email or messaging apps every 6 minutes throughout the workday. Do the math, and you'll realize why you can't remember the last time you produced something you were genuinely proud of. You're not working. You're context switching yourself into mediocrity. But here's what Newport discovered that changes everything. The ability to perform deep work, to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks isn't just nice to have anymore. It's become the superpower that separates those who thrive from those who merely survive in the modern economy. And the cruel irony, just as deep work becomes more valuable, it's also becoming more rare. Everyone around you is getting worse at it, which means that if you can master it, if you can reclaim your attention and direct it with precision and intensity, you're not competing on a level playing field anymore. You're competing in a different league entirely. The first lesson that transforms everything is understanding that deep work is not about working harder or longer. It's about recognizing that all hours are not created equal. Newport's research, alongside studies from cognitive psychology, demonstrates that the quality of attention you bring to your work has an exponential effect on the value you produce. 1 hour of truly deep work, where you're operating at your cognitive limit without any context switching, can produce more value than an entire day of fragmented attention. This isn't motivational speaking. This is neuroscience. When you're in a state of deep focus, your brain forms denser neural connections. You're not just working faster, you're literally becoming smarter and more capable with every session. Think about a software developer who spends her morning in true deep work, building a complex algorithm without interruptions. Compare her output to a developer who tackles the same problem while checking Slack every few minutes, responding to emails, and half listening to a meeting. The first developer might solve the problem in 2 hours and produce elegant, innovative code. A second might spend 2 days and produce something mediocre that needs to be refactored later. This isn't a small difference. It's the difference between becoming indispensable and becoming replaceable. Consider what's happening right now in the freelance economy. Platforms like Upwork and Fiverr are flooded with people offering generic services, but there's a tiny elite who charge 10 times, sometimes 50 times more than everyone else, and they're booked solid months in advance. What separates them isn't talent or credentials. It's their ability to consistently produce work that's so good it seems almost magical to their clients. And the secret behind that magic is deep work. They've structured their lives to protect large blocks of uninterrupted time where they can push their cognitive capabilities to their limit, while everyone else is available, responsive, and drowning in shallow work. They're unavailable, focused, and producing miracles. The marketplace doesn't reward effort anymore. It rewards results. And results come from depth, not breadth. But here's where most people immediately go wrong when they learn about deep work. They think it's simply about blocking out time on the calendar and trying harder to focus. They schedule a 4-hour block, close their email, and then wonder why they're staring at a blank screen feeling anxious and unproductive. This brings us to the second transformative lesson. Deep work is a skill that must be trained deliberately, not a switch you can simply flip. Your brain has been conditioned by years of constant stimulation and instant gratification. Every notification, every quick check of social media, Every rapid toggle between tasks has literally rewired your neural pathways to crave distraction. You've trained yourself to be unable to tolerate boredom or cognitive strain. Trying to suddenly work deeply is like trying to run a marathon after years of sitting on the couch. You need a training protocol. Newport advocates for what he calls productive meditation, which is the practice of taking a period when you're occupied physically but not mentally, walking, jogging, driving, showering, and focusing your attention on a single professional problem. The goal isn't to solve the problem during the walk. The goal is to train your attention to stay focused on one thing despite your mind's constant attempts to wander. When your mind wanders, which it will, you gently but firmly bring it back to the problem at hand. This is attention training disguised as problems, and it works because it targets the root issue, your inability to sustain focus, not your lack of time or discipline. A marketing consultant I know started practicing productive meditation during her morning runs. She'd pick one client challenge and think through it for the entire 30 minutes. For the first 2 weeks, her mind wandered constantly. She'd catch herself thinking about her grocery list, replaying conversations, planning her day, but she persisted, always bringing her attention back. After a month, something shifted. She noticed that during her actual work sessions, she could sustain focus for dramatically longer periods. Her brain had been retrained. The distraction reflex was still there, but it was weaker, and she had developed the mental muscle to override it. The brutal truth is that most people will never develop with this capacity because they never give their brains the chance to adapt. They fill every possible moment with stimulation. Waiting in line, check Instagram, stuck in traffic, listen to a podcast, eating lunch, watch YouTube. Their brains never experience boredom, which means they never develop the tolerance for the cognitive strain that deep work requires. If you're constantly giving your brain easy wins and dopamine hits, you're training it to be incapable of hard things. This is why the third lesson is so counterintuitive and so powerful. Embrace boredom strategically, not because boredom is virtuous, but because it's the training ground for attention. Newport suggests scheduling internet use rather than scheduling time away from the internet. Instead of saying, "I'll avoid the internet during my deep work blocks," you flip the script entirely. You'll schedule specific times when you'll allow yourself to use the internet for personal purposes. And outside those times, you simply don't use it at all, even if you're not working on something important. This sounds extreme until you understand the mechanism. Every time you give in to the urge to check your phone or browse the web when you're slightly bored or stuck, you're training your brain that it doesn't have to tolerate any discomfort. You're reinforcing the neural pathway that says feeling uncomfortable equals immediate distraction needed. But when you feel that urge and don't give in to it, when you sit with boredom or the cognitive strain, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching it that discomfort is temporary and that focus is a choice you can make regardless of how you feel. A financial analyst who adopted this approach found that the first week was almost unbearable. He'd finish a difficult analysis and feel the overwhelming urge to check the news or scroll through Twitter as a reward. But he'd scheduled his next internet block for another hour, so he simply sat there, feeling restless and uncomfortable. He'd get up, make coffee, look out the window, come back to his desk, and then something remarkable would happen. Without the easy escape hatch of distraction, his mind would naturally start working on the next problem. He'd have insights and make connections he never would have reached if he'd given himself the dopamine hit of clicking over to a news site. Within a month, his productivity had genuinely transformed. He was completing in 3 days what used to take him 2 weeks. This brings us to the fourth lesson, which is perhaps the most economically valuable insight in Newport's entire framework. The difference between deep work and shallow work isn't just about productivity. It's about economic value in an AI-driven economy. Shallow work, logistical tasks, responding to emails, attending meetings, filling out forms, is increasingly being automated or commoditized. The AI tools emerging right now are shockingly good at handling shallow work. They can draft emails, schedule meetings, summarize documents, create basic reports. What they can't do, at least not yet, is the kind of deep, original thinking that solves novel problems or creates genuinely innovative solutions. If your work life is primarily shallow work, you're competing with automation and with millions of other people who can do the same tasks. Your economic value is trending towards zero. But if you can consistently engage in deep work, producing insights and solutions that require sustained cognitive effort and original thinking, you're in a different category entirely. You're producing things that are genuinely scarce and therefore genuinely valuable. Consider 2 accountants. The first spends most of their day on tasks that require knowledge but not deep thinking. Filing forms, checking compliance boxes, responding to standard questions, attending meetings. The second has structured their work life to minimize these shallow tasks, automating what can be automated, delegating what can be delegated, batching what must be done so they can spend the majority of their time on deep work, analyzing complex financial scenarios, developing tax strategies that require genuine expertise and creative problem solving, advising clients on intricate financial decisions, which accountant has a more secure future, which one can command premium rates, which one finds their work fulfilling rather than soul-crushing. The answer is obvious, but here's what's not obvious to most people. Both accountants have the same credentials, the same knowledge base, the same potential. The only difference is how they've chosen to structure their attention and their time. One is optimized for responsiveness and availability. The other is optimized for value creation through depth. In 5 years, the first accountant might be struggling to compete with AI-powered accounting software. The second will likely be more in demand and better compensated than ever. This economic reality creates an urgent imperative that most people are completely blind to. Every hour you spend on shallow work when you could be doing deep work isn't just a productivity loss. It's an investment in making yourself less valuable in the future economy. You're literally training yourself to be good at things that won't matter and neglecting to develop the capacity that will matter most. The fifth lesson addresses the practicality of making this shift. You need to be ruthless about shallow work, not just mindful of it. Newport talks about the concept of fixed schedule productivity, where you commit to ending your workday at a specific time, usually around 5:30, and then work backward to figure out how to make that possible. This forces you to confront the reality of how you're spending your time. If you're committed to leaving at 5:30 but have legitimate deep work that needs to be completed, you have no choice but to eliminate or minimize shallow work. You can't just be more efficient. You have to say no. You have to automate. You have to delegate. You have to accept that some things simply won't get done. Most people resist this idea because they've built their professional identity around being helpful, responsive, and available. They fear that saying no or being less available will damage their reputation or their relationships. But Newport's research and countless real-world examples demonstrate the opposite. When you produce exceptionally valuable work, people forgive a lot of unresponsiveness. When you produce mediocre work, being responsive doesn't save you. Think about the best professor you ever had, or the best consultant you've worked with, or the best contractor you've hired. Were they the most responsive? Did they answer every email within an hour? Probably not. What made them exceptional was the quality of their thinking and their output when they did engage. They'd think deeply about your question and send you a thoughtful response that genuinely helped, rather than a quick superficial reply. They'd deliver work that exceeded your expectations rather than just meeting deadlines. You valued them for their depth, not their availability. A product designer I spoke with implemented this principle by creating what she calls office hours for her attention. She responds to emails and messages only during specific windows, 9 to 10 in the morning and 4 to 5 in the afternoon. Outside those windows, everything is closed, email, Slack. Even her phone is in airplane mode, unless she's expecting an urgent call. The first month was uncomfortable. People complained. Some colleagues thought she was being difficult, but she held firm, and something interesting happened. Because people knew they couldn't get instant responses, they learned to send more complete, thoughtful questions. They did more thinking on their own before reaching out. The quality of communication improved dramatically, and because she was spending 6 hours a day in genuine deep work instead of 2 hours of fragmented attention scattered across 10 hours, her output transformed. She went from being seen as a competent team member to being recognized as one of the most innovative and valuable contributors in her company. Her year-end review reflected this. Her compensation reflected this. And ironically, despite being less available, her professional relationships improved because people respected her expertise and valued the quality of her engagement. The sixth lesson is about measurement, and it's where most people's deep work practice falls apart. You can't improve what you don't measure. But measuring deep work is tricky because it's not about hours logged or tasks completed. It's about cognitive intensity sustained over time. Newport advocates for a simple but powerful metric: track your deep work hours each day and each week. Not the hours you spend at your desk. Not the hours you're technically working. The hours where you're engaged in cognitively demanding tasks without any distraction whatsoever. For most people starting out, this number is shockingly low, often less than 1 hour per day, even if they're working 10-hour days. But awareness changes behavior. When you're actually tracking deep work hours, you become conscious of how you're spending your time in a way that transforms your choices. You notice when you're about to break your focus to check email, and you choose not to. You'll recognize when a meeting request is going to destroy your deep work block, and you'll push back. See the correlation between your deep work hours and the value you produce, which creates a powerful feedback loop. An entrepreneur I know tracks deep work hours in a visible place, a whiteboard in his office where he writes the number each day. His goal is 20 hours per week, which sounds modest until you try to actually achieve it. It requires saying no to most meetings, batching all administrative tasks into compressed windows, and protecting his mornings with almost aggressive discipline. But the results speak for themselves. In the 18 months since he started tracking, his business revenue has tripled. Not because he's working longer hours, but because the work he's producing during those deep work sessions is exponentially more valuable. He's developing products instead of responding to customer service issues. He's creating strategic partnerships instead of attending networking events. He's writing content that attracts customers instead of manually reaching out to prospects. Every deep work hour creates leverage that shallow work simply cannot match. And because he measures it, he's accountable to it in a way that vague intentions about focusing more could never achieve. This brings us to the seventh, and perhaps most paradigm-shifting lesson. Deep work isn't just a productivity strategy. It's a philosophy of professional life that determines not just what you accomplish, but who you become. When you consistently engage in deep work, pushing your cognitive capabilities to their limit, you're not just producing better work, you're literally expanding your capacity. The brain is neuroplastic, it physically changes in response to how you use it. Every deep work session is strengthening the neural pathways associated with sustained attention and complex thinking. Over time, you become capable of work that would have been impossible for you a year ago. Not because you learn new information, but because you build new cognitive capacity. This creates a compounding effect that separates the merely competent from the truly exceptional. Someone who commits to deep work for a year doesn't just produce more. They become capable of producing things that their peers can't even conceptualize. There's a master craftsman quality to this that's been lost in modern knowledge work. A traditional craftsman, a furniture maker, a blacksmith, a stone carver would spend thousands of hours practicing their craft with intense focus and attention to detail. Over decades, they'd develop skills and intuitions that were essentially impossible to replicate. They'd look at a piece of wood and see possibilities that others couldn't perceive. They'd solve problems with solutions that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Modern knowledge work has largely abandoned this model in favor of breadth over depth, speed over quality, availability over expertise. But the people who are winning in the current economy, the consultants charging $1,000 an hour, the developers building products that millions of people use, the writers and creators building audiences that translate into genuine wealth, they've rediscovered the power of depth. They've chosen to become craftsmen in an age of generalists. Newport tells the story of a computer science professor who produced groundbreaking research despite teaching full-time at a demanding university. His secret wasn't longer hours or superior intelligence. It was a commitment to deep work that bordered on monastic. He'd arrive at his office before anyone else, usually around 6 in the morning, and work in complete isolation until noon. During those 6 hours, he produced more valuable research than most of his colleagues produced in a month. The afternoons were for teaching, meetings, and all the shallow work that academic life requires. But those morning hours were sacred. No email, no phone calls, no interruptions. Just sustained, intense cognitive effort on problems that mattered. Over the course of his career, this practice led to discoveries that fundamentally advanced his field. His life's work became possible because of a simple but uncompromising commitment. Protect the depth, tolerate the shallow only when absolutely necessary. What makes this lesson so crucial right now is that we're living through a moment of profound transition. The economy is rewarding depth more than ever while simultaneously training people to be incapable of it. Every platform, every app, every digital tool is engineered to fragment your attention. Social media companies have invested billions in understanding how to make their products as addictive as possible. Email and messaging systems have normalized the expectation of instant response. Remote work has blurred the boundaries between work time and personal time, creating a culture of constant availability. If you simply go with the flow, if you adopt the work patterns that feel normal in this environment, you will be incapable of deep work. You'll spend your entire career in a state of perpetual distraction, producing work that's adequate but never exceptional, feeling busy but never fulfilled, watching others somehow pull ahead while you can't figure out what you're doing wrong. The gap between those who can focus deeply and those who can't is becoming an economic chasm. The path forward requires a level of intentionality that most people aren't willing to commit to. You need to audit your life with brutal honesty and ask, what percentage of my working hours are spent in genuine deep work? For most people, the answer is somewhere between 5 and 15%. The rest is shallow work, pseudo work, and distraction masquerading as productivity. Then you need to design your life around protecting and expanding that percentage. This means making hard choices about what you say yes to and what you say no to. It means disappointing people who want you to be more available. It means accepting that some things won't get done. It means structuring your physical environment, your schedule, and your habits around the singular goal of enabling sustained cognitive effort on things that matter. A venture capitalist I know implemented this by creating what he calls his monk schedule. 2 days per week, Tuesday and Thursday, are completely blocked off for deep work. No meetings, no calls, no exceptions. He doesn't check email or messages until 4 in the afternoon. On those days, his team knows, his companies know, his founders, who want to meet with him, work around it. And here's what he discovered. Far from damaging his effectiveness, this schedule made him dramatically better at his job. During those deep work blocks, he reads dozens of pitch decks, analyzes market trends, thinks deeply about portfolio strategy, and writes detailed memos to his partners. The quality of his thinking and his decision-making improves so noticeably that other partners at the firm started adopting similar practices. The firms that compete with them haven't figured this out yet. They're still operating on the old model: more meetings, faster responses, constant availability. They think they're being efficient. They're actually making themselves less capable of the deep strategic thinking that venture capital requires. Within 5 years, the gap in performance between firms that embrace deep work and firms that don't will be staggering. This is the pattern across every knowledge work industry. The winners aren't the hardest workers or even the smartest workers, they're the deepest workers. They're the ones who've recognized that attention is the ultimate scarce resource and have organized their lives accordingly. They've made the shift from measuring productivity by hours a task to measuring it by the value created during states of unbroken focus. They've accepted the social cost of being less available because they understand the economic and personal benefit of being more capable. They've stopped trying to keep up with everyone and everything and started focusing on doing a few things exceptionally well. If you're listening to this and feeling a mix of excitement and dread, that's the right response. The excitement comes from recognizing that you have access to a superpower that most of your competition is actively destroying in themselves. The dread comes from realizing how difficult it will be to actually implement these practices in your life. Every force in modern culture is pulling you toward distraction. Your phone wants your attention, your colleagues expect responsiveness, social media algorithms are optimized to keep you scrolling. Your own brain has been trained to crave the easy dopamine hits of novelty and validation. Swimming against this current requires more than good intentions. It requires systems, boundaries, and a willingness to be different. But here's what happens if you don't. If you continue on your current path, allowing your attention to be fragmented and your cognitive capacity to atrophy, you'll wake up in 5 years and realize you've been left behind. You'll watch as people who seem no more talented than you are commanding opportunities and compensation that feel out of reach. You'll feel increasingly anxious about automation and AI, knowing deep down that much of what you do could be replaced. You'll experience the persistent dissatisfaction of being busy without being productive, working hard without producing anything you're proud of. And worst of all, you'll have lost years of your life to shallow work and distraction. Years you could have spent building genuine expertise and creating genuine value. The tragedy isn't that you'll fail dramatically. It's that you'll succeed just enough to keep going while never reaching anything close to your potential. The alternative is to start today. Not tomorrow, not next Monday. Today. Block off 2 hours tomorrow morning for deep work. Turn off your phone. Close your email. Close every tab except what you need for the task at hand. Pick one cognitively demanding task that would genuinely move your career or your business forward if you completed it exceptionally well, and work on it with complete focus for 2 hours. You'll be amazed at how difficult this is. Your mind will rebel. You'll feel the urge to check something every few minutes. You'll convince yourself that you need to look something up or verify something or respond to something. Don't sit with discomfort. Bring your attention back to the task. Notice how much more you accomplish in those 2 hours than you typically accomplish in an entire day of fragmented attention. Then do it again the next day and the next day. Build the habit and the capacity gradually, but build it with absolute consistency. Your future self, the version of you that exists 5 years from now, will be shaped by the choices you make about your attention in the present. You can become someone who's indispensable because of the rare and valuable things you can produce through deep work. Or you can become someone who's struggling to stay relevant in an economy that no longer values what you're good at. The gap between these two futures is already opening. The question is which side of it you'll be on. Deep work isn't a nice-to-have anymore. It's the essential skill for anyone who wants to thrive rather than merely survive in an economy that's rewarding depth and punishing shallowness. The opportunity is sitting in front of you right now. The only question is whether you'll have the discipline and the vision to seize it before everyone else realizes what you already know. If you want to win in a distracted world, master deep work before everyone else does. Start today, protect your focus, and watch your results multiply. Subscribe now and join the top 10% who refuse to be average. Thanks.